broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the February installment of the Clinical Conductor webinar series. My name is Katie Guyek, and I'll be your moderator for the webinar today. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items I want to share. First, we'll be providing a copy of the presentation via email within 24 hours of the webinar ending, so make sure you check the email you used to register for the webinar. Also, we'll be doing a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, so please submit any questions you have at any time using the GoToMeeting question box on the right-hand side of your screen. Today's presentation is titled, Are Your Goals Aligned? And will be presented by Jeffrey Schick, Senior Consultant for Site Strategy at PFS Clinical. Jeffrey currently works as a Senior Consultant for Site Strategy at PFS Clinical, where he advises clients on research administration and operations. With extensive expertise in healthcare and research, Jeff has led teams through all aspects of complex assignments, patient relations, financial management, resource allocation, and change management. Prior to joining PFS Clinical, Jeff held multiple high-level positions in research administration at several large hospitals and health systems. So I'm going to hand it over now to Jeff to start today's presentation.
Muted.
Thank you, Katie. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to have an opportunity to talk with you all today. The title of our presentation is Are Your Goals Aligned? And really what it is an opportunity to look at your research organization, whether you are a standalone, separate business entity that may be separate from a healthcare organization on the organizational chart in terms of a separate business unit, or whether you're a department embedded within a community-based hospital or a hospital system and function alongside other departments that provide clinical care. There comes an opportunity or a time where you need to take a step back and really look at what is the long-term goal of the research entity, and how do you start to make strides forward to strategically align resources and strategically identify opportunities for a brighter future instead of continually trying to put out the latest crisis of the day. So hopefully through the discussion over the next 45 minutes or so, as we'll give you some ideas, a little bit of a roadmap, and a little bit of inspiration in terms of how to look at your organization and plan for the future. PFS Clinical, which I have the pleasure of working for, is a service-based organization that works with research entities, primarily with research departments or research institutes that are part of larger healthcare organizations. But we do also have services that we work with dedicated research sites. This presentation is a little bit more geared towards the former, but essentially the services PFS Clinical provides are an extension of your study startup team and or your research business team. So services that can be of substance and value to the organization in lieu of staffing up, or can provide interim coverage during the times of transition on behalf of organizations. We also, within PFS Clinical, have a very small consulting arm that traditionally has worked with our client, but is also from time to time works with organizations that do not utilize any of our business services. And there's like I said, a small and nimble dedicated team of consultants that will help research entities either on process improvement, on policy development, on compliance concerns, either short or long-term projects. We provide an option there. A little bit about myself. As Katie mentioned, I've had an opportunity to be involved in research administration for about the past 20 years. Like many of you, I've probably worked in one or more organizations that have come to the abrupt realization that their research enterprise is larger or much more complex than they expected it to be, and scrambled frantically to try and put their arms around the research endeavor, to put some organizational structure in place, and have had a variety of possibly a variety of different experiences in terms of how that's gone with the various stakeholders in there. So it's been my pleasure to work both in academic medical center setting as well as community-based, for regional health systems as well as national health systems, and in both the for-profit and not-for-profit world as well. And as stated, I've been in it, in the muck, so to speak, up to my elbows, trying to figure out how to carve 5 days out of the study startup process to keep investigators happy by getting contracts signed that much faster, as well as been working with C-suite level discussions around creating a more strategic direction for research entities to go that complement the healthcare interests of an organization and make a positive impact both to the communities they serve as well as to the organization's bottom line where possible. So as we talk about this presentation really is going to be talking through kind of the strategic plan development for a research site. Many organizations have taken this on. You've got mission statements and you've got visions for your hospital, for your health system, for your parent company. But has your research entity gone through this same exercise? Or if you have you revisited it recently? So what we encourage is, definitely if you've never done this before, is to take a step back, disassociate yourself for a period of time from the healthcare entity, and to take a look at the world from the research perspective and how you would want to realign the resources available and the structure available to reach a higher level of performance, whether that's over a short period of time or potentially over years. Varies by organizational need, but there is value, even at a department of research level, to really step back and look at what are the expectations and what are the needs to keep research moving forward within the organization. So the strategic plan development process starts off with really evaluating your current state. How does research fit into the mission of the organization? Having conversations and discussions with key stakeholders that are critical to your organization and critical to your research enterprise to ensure there's alignment or at least understanding on expectations, and a bit of education back and forth in terms of what those expectations are and what some of the challenges are from both sides to realizing and reaching accomplishment of those types of goals. And then to set some specific expectations around clinical research. What does research want to be when it grows up? What do you want to be in the next quarter, in the next year, in the next decade? And what's it going to take to get to that point? Evaluating current structure, current resources, and identifying any gaps or shortfalls that are currently in place. When it's all said and done, understanding the expectations of performance is the key in terms of the stakeholders that are relying upon research services or that are overseeing the organization, and making sure that there is good communication between the research entity and the organization that parents it. And understand there may be multiple perspectives. You may at some point ask, how many plates can I keep spinning at the same time? But to know that up front and to know those challenges and to be able to communicate those challenges is an important piece. The second part of the strategic plan development piece goes into really establishing that vision for the future. And your vision is your dream in terms of how would the world look if the important issues were perfectly addressed. What needs to be in place, or what would the performance of the research entity be if the magic wand was waved and all of the components lined up nicely and pieces flow together? What could be accomplished under that sort of scenario? And then you start moving down into some of the details around a mission statement. What are specific goals? What are the tactics to accomplishing those goals? And then the measurement and evaluation system that goes in. So let's first start with that vision in terms of what is the ideal state of the future. The vision really inspires your organization to dream, or those that are involved within the research entity to dream of what the future can be. Your mission statement is an inspiration that calls people to action. So after undergoing an exercise and really thinking and talking with individuals about what the vision for the future is, it's time to consider what the mission of the research entity or how the research entity fits into the mission statement of your parent organization. And this needs to be, this is an opportunity to ground your vision in practical terms. It's a declaration of purpose. It typically remains unchanged over a period of time, although organizations do over the years, and as change in leadership happens, will revisit their mission statements. They will revisit their vision statements. And when those opportunities arise at a organizational level, hopefully your research entity is primed and prepped as an opportunity to capitalize on that and potentially have a voice and get included in the mission for the future. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. The mission statement is a filter. Helps you determine what is and what is not important, and gives you an opportunity to communicate that, again, to those stakeholders. So to be able to have a basis to communicate with investigators, with employees of the organization, to help them understand how research fits into a healthcare entity, or if the research is a standalone entity, how it fits into the bigger community-wide business world that you find yourself in, whether you serve a single community or whether you're a regional type entity. How does the research department or research institute fit into that? And again, the mission is something to be accomplished. Here's a couple examples of organizational level mission statements. And when I say that, from time to time, as leadership changes or as leadership chooses to look at the mission of a healthcare organization with the right research champion, with the right connections, with the right conversations already been in place, it really behooves you, or behooves the champion of research, to try and find a way to get research and innovation included in a healthcare organization's mission. Two simple examples. So example number one is a multi-state healthcare system that has about $5 billion in annual revenue, and within their mission statement specifically calls out that the advancement of medical education and research is a key piece of the organization reaching its vision of the future. This becomes incredibly valuable for leveraging resources down the road, whether it's capital expenses for investment in technology, whether it's allocation of space or square footage within buildings and establishments of new research programs, whether it's resources needed to recruit and hire research teams or investigators. If that's part of your vision, the inclusion of research in the organization's mission statement can be incredibly powerful. The second example is a bit more traditional. An academic medical center, this one being one of the several academic medical centers that do great work in the upper Midwest. Again, specifically within its mission statement calls out, the scientific research and how that leads to knowledge and advancement of the healing mission. Again, a powerful message. It ties into why the research fits into healthcare, how it can be linked into the importance of improved patient care quality, how research can tie into be just as important in terms of patient satisfaction, of investigator recruitment, of service delivery models. Research needs to be ingrained in a part of that mission for the future if you are going to take maximum opportunity to grow and develop and make your research interests a well-known and an ingrained part of your healthcare organization. So whether you're reviewing an existing mission statement and vision, or you're revising it after a period of time from one that was updated a couple years ago, or if you're developing a department level vision and mission for guidance, it does become important to not try and do this in a vacuum. you need to reach out and have conversations from organizational stakeholders that either are impacted by the research entity's actions or can benefit from a successful research enterprise, and make sure that they are aware and understanding of your interests in terms of making sure that there's clarity around the purpose of the research entity, as well as that there has been some conversation in terms of needs and desires for future state. So this, you know, in some of the key levels that are important to have a conversation with, and this could be directly from, you know, the research director or vice president of research level, or it could be indirect depending on the relationship and how a research department may be embedded within a physician services arm of an organization, or potentially embedded within, you know, sometimes it's embedded within a corporate services type structure. But having conversations with the C-suite, making sure or understanding how the CEO and COO of your organization, how they view research and importance therein, is important. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to agree with it, but it can be a sobering and important reality check of what their current view of research is in terms of importance, and allows you to know what kind of steps you may have to consider and what type of work you have ahead of you to potentially change some of those predispositions that are already present, to make them understand of the true value that research can bring to a healthcare organization. Or you may be pleasantly surprised or get confirmation of what you knew, that research and innovation is well supported at the top, which can be, you know, a real buoyant feeling to know that, you know, even at the top, that the work you do is valued. Some of the other stakeholders that's important to touch base on, of course, is finances. As much as we talk about being innovative, breaking new ground, wanting to bring new therapies and new treatments and new treatment options to the patient population, there is still a fiscal responsibility from an institute or department that ties back to its parent organization, and needs to be a clear understanding of what the expectations from finance are. Similarly, expectations from physician leadership, if you have a medical group that is part of your organization or potentially separate from your healthcare organization but closely aligned with, have those conversations in terms of how does physician leadership look at research, and specifically clinical trials research. Is it encouraged? Is it something they wish to grow and foster and leverage for physician recruitment? Or is it something that's tolerated and is not necessarily seen as a driver in a growth pattern for a medical group or a physician group, but is important because of certain physician champions? And that's a key piece of information that you'll want to know as you structure your plans for the future as well. Conversations between the clinical service line leadership and even the operational leaders within clinical areas. This is getting into a little bit more tactics that we'll talk to the end, but you know, not only frontline discussions around how they view research, and again, is it something they do and they tolerate because they're asked to, or something that they have a true interest in, but then how to make that better and how to open up pathways of communication on a regular basis. So maybe it's a semi-annual conversation between the neuroscience service line and the research partner. What is the future of the clinical care that they're seeing, and how does that potentially shape research opportunities that you'll seek out in coming years? Having that alignment, having those conversations can open a lot of doors, as well as can create better understanding between the challenges of delivering clinical care and the opportunities to provide innovative and groundbreaking care through medical research. And then, of course, conversation with compliance. We've all had it. We all know it. Compliance is a balance between acceptance of risk and business opportunities, but to understand and have a clear understanding of where your chief compliance officer or a research compliance officer is coming from, the key hotspots that they are concerned about, and what you can do to assure them that the organization is protected, or what you can do to identify gaps and opportunities that need to be invested in to close some of those gaps. Those are important discussions and help shape not only how the vision grows in terms of growth, but how you need to protect the research entity and protect the healthcare organization through assurance that you have the appropriate processes and resources in place to maintain effective research compliance programs. So again, what are the expectations of clinical research from the parent organization? Why do your physicians, your physician investigators, your hospitals, your ambulatory surgery centers, why do they engage in research? What are the desired benefits? And this varies, and there's not a wrong answer. It really comes from what is the truth in terms of why your organization has historically participated in clinical research, and potentially what some of the additional benefits are that have not yet been realized and can be built into your plan for development that allows research to grow and elevate its importance within the organization. Is your organization participating in clinical research because it truly wants to be part of discovery and invention? Often very common in an academic medical center setting, and more becoming present in integrated healthcare delivery systems that have the resources to leverage some basic science and some translational science projects, whereas that were typically and traditionally thought of as being the realm of academic medical centers. As some of the consolidation in the healthcare world has occurred over the last couple of decades, there are now very large organizations that have resources available for investment and potentially look at that opportunity to be on the discovery end of clinical research. Is your organization one of those? Is your organization more focused on the advancement of the science of medicine, especially through publications and presentation? Is it important, and is it valuable to your organization to have a list of investigators that have publications, that are doing poster presentations, to have a robust program that allows these physician investigators or these investigators to be out representing the healthcare organization at national conferences or regional conferences, and to build on the reputation that the healthcare organization has not only in patient care, but potentially in research and innovation. There's value to that as well. Is your organization strictly looking for, contributing to new treatments and therapies through clinical trials? And that could include, are you looking for options and opportunities for your patient base? Quite common within the oncology clinical trial realm is that we get a proliferation of clinical trial protocols that are open and active and seek enrollments because physician investigators in that therapeutic line want options and opportunities for patients. It's a methodology for building a research portfolio. It has pros and cons to it, but it's important to understand the viewpoint of why your organization may have reached that point. In terms of, you find yourself with hundreds of open clinical trial protocols and only a fraction of them are actively enrolling subjects, is that acceptable? But to know what the expectations of clinical research are in terms of supporting that and why that's important both to the investigators and to the oncology service line is a key piece as you formulate plans for the future. As previously mentioned, is research there to enhance your reputation and potentially be involved in recruitment? There are community-based healthcare organizations that have successfully leveraged strong, robust clinical trials research program and actively pursued and recruited physician investigators and entire teams of researchers that come with them out of some of the more traditional research-based healthcare organizations. To pull them out of academia and into community-based practice isn't so rare anymore, and even pull them from those hybrid organizations that are very rich in tradition of research and innovation, like a Marshfield Clinic, a Mayo Clinic, like that is not unheard of for an organization that's really looking to leverage research and is willing to invest in research and innovation as it brings in new talents into its pool of physicians. And then again, what's the tie-in and what's the expectation for research to support and enhance current clinical programs? And we'll talk about that a little bit more. There are certain expectations around clinical programs that are important to understand how research fits in. And we'll get right into that now, I guess. So we talked a little bit again about the cancer service line. So oftentimes what I hear when we talk with research entities that are participating in cancer clinical trials is they have a large portfolio of studies because investigators want options to treat people, and ultimately the goal of the service line is to be able to meet the needs on the Commission on Cancer accreditation for percentages of new cases that are enrolled in clinical research. Those don't necessarily have to be in therapeutic clinical trials, but often it's perceived as the path of least resistance is to open many clinical trials, providing opportunities for patients to enroll and become research subjects, and so you wind up with a proliferation. If that is valuable to your oncology service line, it's important to know. It's important to understand and communicate with them what the potential cost is for maintaining that many open studies with limited enrollments or with limited reimbursement for enrollments if you're participating in an NCORP type organization that has minimal reimbursement for each enrollment. Then there are other clinical service lines that have an expectation around or a requirement around research activity in order to reach certain levels. Trauma medicine, extremely important to many organizations around the country to have trauma centers, and there is a required component to become a higher level trauma centers in terms of having ongoing research. To understand that and to know that a certain responsibility of the research department or research institute in terms of supporting potentially non-financially viable research, investigator-initiated research or outcomes-type research that doesn't have direct sponsorship in terms of how it's conducted, but is incredibly important to the achievement level in terms of accreditations and designations for certain clinical service lines is important to communicate within your organization. And then you've got the expectations around certain therapeutic treatments therapies or treatments in terms of things being required by coverage with evidence determination around registries in order to be reimbursable by Medicare. These aren't going to oftentimes get tagged to a research department to manage because it involves IRB oversight, involves consenting. There's a certain amount of research billing compliance that has to go into the processing of research encounters that turn into claims to payers, but they don't necessarily drive a lot of revenue back to the research department. They are there for the support and for the betterment and the advancement of the clinical service line. So identifying those and explaining and reaching an awareness in terms of how much of your research activity that you have the responsibility for maintaining are non-revenue driving type activities in terms of what comes into the profit and loss statement on a monthly basis for the research entity. Another example is again a cardiac transplant program. To have access to organ supply for transplant, a certain level of research is necessary, and so that it becomes an organizational decision in terms of, as a tertiary care center, and to what degree the healthcare organization wants to play in that environment becomes an expectation and a necessity for research to be engaged in order for them to operate at the highest level. We talked a little bit a couple slides ago about having the conversation around the financial expectations of research and innovation. And again, that is, in all honesty, that is where I like to start when we have a conversation, either with a client looking at their organization and what the opportunity improvement is, or when working with different organizations on their projects, is what is the expectation that the healthcare organization has for their research department or their research institute. For many, it's they want us to break even. If we can minimize our losses or keep it to an acceptable investment level, that is acceptable. I think for many organizations have realized that profitability is very difficult. Not to discourage those from trying, because there are organizations that achieve financial profitability around research, but from what I've seen, it's somewhat rare and definitely not easy to achieve. So having that conversation with finance around, what is the expectation and what's the acceptable investment level? What is the expectation from year to year in terms of resources that are going to be available for research? Are you on a straight cost center type methodology where, like many other hospital departments or health system departments, your budget from last year has got a certain percent increase or decrease for next year, and you're held to everyone else's expectations as well? Or is research seen and accepted as a potential growth opportunity, and the organization is willing to invest a percent of revenue back into research? So that could be, as simple as a percent of gross medical group revenues, or a percentage of gross or net revenues from a health system can be reinvested back into research as a way to invest for the future. Or is your organization really truly looking to swing for the fences? And there are some that are. So in addition to participating in clinical trials research, there are many healthcare organizations, not all of them academic medical centers, many increasingly those that are community-based healthcare systems or hospitals, that are developing technology transfer offices, research and innovation offices that include opportunities to develop ideas, potentially create prototypes, look for opportunities to license and market inventions that are proven to be, that will work and that can be patentable and can be commercialized and bring revenue back to an organization. So this is a list from a 2013 survey. Out of that list of responding organizations that identified their licensing revenue for the year of 2012, you can see there's some pretty high dollar amounts, some pretty well-known and pretty heavy hitters out here that are turning innovation into licensing revenue, which comes back to support them. But even at lower levels, having a positive flow of income from an idea or two back to the organization could be the desire that your organization has. Are they willing to invest in that? Do they understand that it's potentially a long-term play? But with with a little bit of luck and with the right moves, can be a very lucrative venture down the road. So again, these are an example, probably, and again, not the only organizations, but definitely some organizations that have found a way to drive innovation back into a positive financial outcome for their organization. So you finished your conversations with the within your organizational stakeholders, and now you're starting to develop your strategic plan. You've talked about your vision, and you've started to formulate, either yourself or with your team, what the future looks like. You've developed a mission statement that grounds it in practicality, and you're starting to develop your strategies in terms of what gets us from right now to that point in the future that is closer to your vision. What are the goals that are specific and measurable that will allow you to take steps towards accomplishing successful strategies? What are the tactics that are how you go about making the changes to swing the pendulum along a positive line to accomplish your goal that feeds up? And what is that measurement system that allows you to track progress and be able to report progress going forward? Some of the key concepts out there as you develop your strategic plan as well is also looking at the environment you sit in. So competitive differentiation. How does your site stand out? Is it specific to your investigator population? Do you have the best cardiovascular team within hundreds of miles, and you are a destination center for cardiac clinical care. That is something to leverage and that you probably want to maintain. Do you have something unique around your population of subjects that you're recruiting from? Access to certain subpopulations, certain aspects or key factors that make them more likely to participate in research, or if less likely, to know and understand that as well. And then again, based on the conversations you've had with your clinical service line departments, how do you leverage and partner clinical excellence with your research excellence? How do you make those go hand in glove, so to speak, to allow everyone to understand that a better research program, ultimately long-term, can help lead to better patient outcomes, to better quality of care, to a better environment for providing the best care for the patients who choose to seek it at a hospital or a healthcare setting. And then what are your competitors doing? What's the external factors in terms of your competitors? Is the health system across town or across the street opening a new research institute? Are they bringing in new physicians, new investigators? Is there a merger in place? All of those external factors need to be figured in as well. As we get into some of the formulating and start developing some of the goals and tactics around starting to take steps forward, there are oftentimes several tools that we see healthcare departments, research departments or research institutes fail to take full advantage of. Many are engaged in these at some level, but they're not getting the most for their efforts. And oftentimes we see this in marketing. So study-specific advertising is a key thing. Is most organizations these days, definitely the ones that we advise and we provide business services to, are asking study sponsors on clinical trials for advertising dollars to promote studies. But are you truly and religiously utilizing those dollars? Even if sometimes we get feedback from study teams that they get the research advertising dollars in their study budget, but don't actively pursue putting those advertisements out there, whether they're flyers or newspaper ads or radio ads or electronic postings on social media, because they just haven't historically gotten a lot of direct subjects from that. That's good. That's understood. However, there is value in getting your organizational name out there in front of the general population. To have existing patients, family members of existing patients, family members of potential future patients, see your organization, whether it's a research specific or a research entity that's part of a healthcare organization, to see that name, to see that logo, to start to associate it with new opportunities in healthcare, cutting edge medicine, innovative therapies, has value long term, even if it doesn't directly translate to a potential patient that chooses to consent and enroll in a study. Additionally, the leveraging of technology. Is your electronic medical record system working with research? Is it provisioned to be supportive of and to be a two-way street where your research teams are providing the appropriate information within the EMR that's needed for compliance, that's needed for building? And is it also working for you in terms of helping you and providing an opportunity to better identify patient populations, or to connect with patients who need to know that they are potentially eligible and you want to get in front of to present them an opportunity to participate? Too many organizations accept roadblocks that come through the EMR because it's difficult. It is difficult, but their long-term success really calls upon embracing that technology and leveraging it to work for you the same way it works for the healthcare system. And then taking full advantage of your foundation and philanthropy efforts. Making sure that you've got communication with philanthropy, that they are capitalizing on opportunities to raise monies for research, whether it's investigator-initiated trials, or potentially whether it's patient assistance funds to assist study subjects. There are opportunities, and people are willing to give around the idea of advancing the science of medicine. If your philanthropy unit can be in tune with that, there are opportunities to drive dollars that not only can, launch projects or support investigators, but, be a resource to those individuals who choose to participate in clinical trials, but are faced potentially with unexpected out-of-pocket costs, either because of change of insurance coverage or potentially chronic conditions or catastrophic conditions that, while they're on trial, they reach certain limits in their health insurance benefits, and they're starting to be faced with provisions where even participating on the study is potentially going to cause them problems financially. Not saying that I've seen organizations raise millions of dollars to completely cover those bills, but to be able to have a research subject assistance fund that can help with certain services that, based on financial need qualification, should be billable to insurance, but can be covered by a foundation because of that financial need, is a positive step forward and helps improve the satisfaction level of your research participants, and that word of mouth can help your research program grow. A lot of information, a lot of it high level, I know. Hopefully we've talked through some of the challenges, and you understand that starting at the top and really reaching out to the players within the healthcare organization, both to have a conversation in terms of what they expect as well as what they want from research, and you similarly representing what kind of collaboration or cooperation research needs from a clinical area or needs from a finance or billing area in terms of allow you to be able to take those next steps, and then to figure out ways in terms of how to put those pieces together and identify a roadmap that can take you from today to a point in the future where your research program is stronger, is potentially more financially viable, or at least the understanding around its financial expectations are consistent, that it's exciting to potential physicians, investigators, clinicians that are looking to join your program, that you become a destination and a magnet for talent that wants to be enrolled, and most importantly, that you're able to provide the right opportunities to your patient population in terms of opportunities to participate in research, whether it's outcomes-based study that is just them consenting to allow an investigator to pull information from their medical history that can be valuable for looking at quality improvement projects or long-term impacts for changes, or whether it's the testing of novel and investigative therapies and compounds that might change the course of treatment for a specific disease. It starts at the top, and shaping the vision of where you want research to go allows you then to have the conversations on what resources are needed and align your caregivers into striving to make positive changes to your processes and procedures that allow you to start getting closer to that goal for the future. I think we've got about
Unmuted.
4 questions.
All right. Thank you, Jeff, for that excellent presentation. We'll move now to the question and answer portion of the presentation. Again, if you have any questions, please submit them in the questions box in the GoToMeeting. We do have a couple here already. The first question is, in the financial expectations slide, you don't mention having the research program being profitable from clinical trials operations. Is that not possible?
Yeah, so I touched very briefly on that, but I kind of skipped over it in that it is possible. Where I have seen research institutes or research departments have profitability is really those that become more focused factories around certain disease categories. So to not try and open every type of clinical trial, but to be focused around cardiovascular medicine, or to be focused around neuroscience interventions and innovative therapies therein. To have that focused type factory, that's where I see a greater likelihood of research entities that are able to turn a profit. And in all candor, where I rarely, if ever, see profitability is around organizations that expect cancer clinical trials research to, in and of itself, be profitable. There are those that can do it with the support of infrastructure grants. So if you're an organization that's able to leverage grants to support your research infrastructure, and it's not all trying to come from patient enrollment dollars, that's a significant advantage. But for many community-based healthcare systems, the oncology clinical trials program is a loss leader. It's important. It helps the oncology service line, but it's a lot of burden to carry for the research department.
Okay, next question. The underutilized tool slide mentions research funds to assist subjects. Well, our health system has a charity care program that applies to all patients. Is this what you meant?
I've seen a lot of organizations use that, yes. But what I've worked with some organizations on setting up is a specific patient assistance fund. So, for instance, I'll use the example of cancer clinical trial again. So a subject is referred to an oncologist after failing first-line therapy from another treating oncologist, and the study protocol requires a biopsy that was done within the last 3 months. If that patient is outside that window and it's an NCORPS protocol, that biopsy would need to be repeated. It becomes the healthcare organization's decision in terms of, do they bill the individual for that, knowing that it's not routine care and being done only for research, and so would you direct bill to the patient in order for them to participate? Would you write it off as an organization? I think many would do that, would absorb the cost and say, well, we have to just not bill that service. But now what happens if your performing physician is private practice, or if your pathology group is separate? Now you have to pay them as well. Now you have potential compliance issues of unfunded research, and you're paying external physicians for something you're not getting paid for. So that can sometimes cause heartburn within the compliance world from there. So the establishment of a patient assistance fund can be done oftentimes through the help of philanthropy, allowing contributions either from community events, from individual donors and sponsors, or from a campaign around making donations that can be pooled into a fund that research subjects can apply for. So when it's identified that there's a service that is going to be denied by the insurance or unbillable to their insurance and would fall to the patient or patient's family's out-of-pocket expenditure, to make an application to the research fund based on financial need. A determination can be made in terms of to free up a portion of that fund to cover those expenses. And one of the tricks is to the financial need determination does not have to exactly match your organizational charity care parameters. So you have some flexibility on how to determine that, and I've seen some very solid and very good ways in terms of how the determination process is made and what the committee is that evaluates those, that can allow for a real strong use of those dollars, that allow people who are in the community that are giving to a very good cause, which allows participants in research to not be penalized, for having access to a trial and really being medical heroes around how they contribute to the advancement of medicine.
Okay, next question. Have you seen a profitable site in an academic medical center? If so, what percentage of these programs, in your experience, has been profitable?
What percentage have been profitable?
Yeah.
In my experience, so for those that are not reaping the benefits of licensed invention, it's extremely rare. And I think those that are in that boat where they have a technology transfer office and they are turning concepts and ideas into commercialized products and either licensing them or selling them, those might be reaping some benefits of windfall. But those from research entities that are able to carve out a profit from clinical trials operations, from my experience, I've seen probably maybe 1 in 20, if not 1 in 100, that are really able to do that without significant organizational offset in terms of just expectancy on certain expenses that aren't going to be charged to research from there. But especially if your organization employs its coordinator. So your clinical research teams are employees of research and are not employees of clinical service lines. That's a lot of, like healthcare, it's a lot of staffing hours to cover, a lot of salary dollars to try and cover. And the downtime in research is often one of the hardest things to cover. When we negotiate a good clinical trial agreement, we can get a solid profit for procedures and services that are called in protocol. But how do you cover that time between subjects enrollments, between patient visits? And for some studies that are difficult to enroll, those dollars can rapidly mount. And I rarely see sites that are able to generate, a positive contribution year over year without being, having some laser type focus on a certain area, or having some infrastructure support from grants or expectations that doesn't burden the research enterprise with a lot of that infrastructure cost.
Okay, next question actually sort of plays off the last one. In oncology trials, cooperative group funding is always limited and has typically put research sites in a tough financial dilemma. Any wisdom or suggestions on how to rationalize how sites can improve the funding mechanism for this type of trial?
Yeah, I don't know that I've got a solution on how to improve the funding mechanism. That's pretty much set, set up pretty high, and they control the rules in terms of if you want to participate, well, you know what your reimbursement's going to be, whether it's a, per subject enrollment stipend or whether it's a point-based, based on enrollment, and every protocol has a different point value, and that is translated into dollars back to the organization. It's definitely challenging. I think it has to be a communication around what is the value of being involved in oncology clinical trials. The cooperative group advantage is having a wide access path to a lot of different protocols, a lot of different therapies, and to be able to have flexibility and opportunities for patients. So I know many organizations consider it a little bit of a defensive mechanism, and they are providing opportunities for patients that maybe come off of second-line therapy or third-line therapy, and there's not another standard of care option out there, as opposed to that patient and that patient's family looking for the next organization across town or across the state, looking for the next treatment line, is to have opportunities that are there that keep the patient family where they can be treated close to home, provide them, new opportunities around therapies that are earlier in the pipeline in terms of, along towards approval process, but don't necessitate, medical tourism and traveling across the country or across the state in order to participate. So it can be a little bit of a patient retention mechanism, and that needs to be understood that that's a value to the oncology service line, and the expectation of, is that right for research to monetize that investment and to carry that on the books, or is that more rightfully transferred over to the oncology service line where it can be carried through higher revenue levels that oncology line is going to have compared to research?
Okay, next question. When you were talking about getting input from stakeholders, you didn't mention investigators, and we were wondering why not.
Yeah, investigators are extremely important in the research enterprise. However, at a high level, you have to be very careful about asking investigators their opinion, what they want, what they need, because they will tell you, and they will expect you to live up to that. So I think it's important to communicate with investigators of what the goals of research are and what steps research is taking to make their role as an investigator more effective, whether that's shortening cycle times, whether that's through an improved patient recruitment methodology that's going to bring new patients into their clinic that can be potential screenings and enrollments into the trials they're interested in, whether that's through a revised investigator compensation plan. It's important to communicate that. I would just hesitate to ask a lot of investigators their opinion on this without having it coupled with some guidance from the medical group leadership, because you don't want 25 different opinions which aren't all aligned, and those investigators all to expect you to meet their needs because you asked and they told you. So it's a slippery slope. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be part of the process. I just think that communication with them comes more maybe in terms of as alignment between the medical group leadership and the research leadership has been reached, the communication in terms of how that will benefit the investigator population, how that will make their role more important, more valuable, more satisfying to them, and that becomes a more well-received message.
Okay, last question. In regards to examples of non-traditional research, how do you find those types of projects or relationships?
Right. So oftentimes we think clinical research departments or clinical trials research, people are thinking clinical trials, device, on drugs or devices. They may be doing a little bit of population health work and looking to get involved in some grants. But there are other opportunities out there that might not, again, be hugely lucrative, but can be something that you can differentiate yourselves from other research institutes, as well as be a player in a different aspect. So, for instance, cleaners and disinfectants. There's huge industry around creating cleaners and disinfectants for clinical areas that need to be tested, that need, in essence, a bit of a research work with these manufacturers of these products to test out new formulas, to be able to try out whether it's countertop cleaners, whether it's hand sanitizing, different things like that, to evaluate the effectiveness of it before it's released to, for commercial consumption. There are opportunities to work with a lot of these big businesses around getting involved with some of these type projects, as well as, research around just standard building maintenance type issues, floor care, whether it's cleaners and waxes and floor care products. There's R&D that has to go into that, and there are many organizations that will look for partners that will allow them to test out their products, evaluate it, get feedback. And so your organization may be able to partner with large organizations that are developing cleaners or floor care products and need a real-world environment in which to develop their formulas and test it out. So that can be an opportunity for you. So you have to think outside of the box sometimes and think of what are some of the healthcare products, or what are some of the products that are used in the healthcare world that maybe aren't direct to patients, but is there a role where you as a research department can build a bridge and a relationship to allow a manufacturer to improve what they're developing and can benefit your research program that doesn't involve potentially human subjects research.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. That wraps up our question and answer session for today. And just a reminder that the slides will be sent out via email within 24 hours of the presentation. So thank you, everyone, for attending the presentation today. We hope you found it very interesting and informative. And a big thanks again to Jeff for presenting. And be sure to be on the lookout for the next installment of the Clinical Conductor webinar series. Thanks, everyone.